Hi, everyone. So in this video, I'm going to go over the rhetorical analysis assignment and kind of touch on some of the guidelines and important things you need to be thinking about as you start working on this first writing project. So I've got the assignment sheet up next to me. I'm kind of going to go through it. So, feel free to pull it up as you watch this video and follow along. So as you'll notice there under the purpose, so we're going to work with arguments throughout the course, and that means looking a lot at how people try to convince and persuade other people to do things. And so this first assignment asks you, before you start making your own argument in papers 2 and 3, to look at the arguments of others. And so in this case, thinking about how arguments do the written word or even the spoken word, right? How they operate as multimedia arguments, especially on sites like Facebook and Twitter. So for this assignment, you're going to be looking at the Facebook or Twitter account of a major public figure. So there's a list you'll notice attached at the bottom that you can look through, but you don't have to stick to this list as long as they are a public figure and they have an official profile, and you've okayed it with me. You have a kind of a pretty open choice of who you decide to focus on in your rhetorical analysis. So what you're going to be doing is analyzing their Facebook or Twitter account as a multimedia text. So thinking about how they use text, images, video, all these different elements that kind of come together to create this overall argument. They're trying to do something on this page. So how do they do it? What is it? Who's the audience? And are they successful or not? So that's what you're telling us. So you're going to be looking at the structure, the content, thinking about who the target audience is, what kind of persona the person is trying to create through their Facebook profile or their Twitter profile, and the overall effectiveness. So your goal is to answer that question that's italicized on the assignment sheet. So how does the public figure's Facebook or Twitter account successfully engage its target audience or not? So in other words, let's say if you want to do President Obama, you want to think about who is his target audience at this point. So yeah, sure, it's Democrats, right? But he's also not worried about re-election at this point. So he's got a pretty big audience. Now, who his target audience is may not always be the audience that he's reaching out to, right? But he's got people that he wants to speak to through his Facebook profile. So what's he trying to do, right? A lot these days is about, kind of informing people about the work the White House is doing, things like that, right? So it's, if you look at his official Facebook page, there's a lot of content there about, kind of the work he and his people are doing. So it's a very informative webpage. And so that in mind, right, you want to think about what is he trying to inform people about? Are there things he's still trying to convince or persuade them to do? And then is he successful, right, for this audience? Now, one of the key things you want to keep in mind with this assignment is that you might pick somebody and you may or may not be a member of that target audience, and that's something you have to keep in mind. So maybe you want to do Donald Trump. That's fine, but maybe you're not a fan of Trump. Okay, so that's something you want to keep in mind, right? And it's not about is it successful or you or not so much as is it successful for the people he's trying to target through his Twitter account or whatever. So, or Vin Diesel, right? Maybe you love Vin Diesel, and that's something else you want to keep in mind, right? You don't want to be kind of overly biased. Vin Diesel is the best actor of all time. That you kind of step back and say, what is the work being done here through his Facebook account or something like that. So you'll notice in this next section, there's a what to do, what not to do. So the goal is to analyze the persona and analyze their content. So one of the things you don't want to do in this paper, as I was just kind of touching on, is you're not engaging. So this is not about how you feel about the person, about whether you agree with their agenda or anything like that. And this is not the place for that. So, and that's actually an easy way to not do well on this paper very quickly. So as I was saying, Trump's a good example. He's a very polarizing figure. So, if you love Trump in this paper, I don't care. If you hate him in this paper, I don't care. This is not the space for that. So what you are saying is, right, this is what he tries to do on Twitter, and this is his audience. Does that succeed or not? So that's basically what you're looking at. So you need to make sure that you remain unbiased throughout your analysis. Now that means proving your viewpoints. So pulling out evidence, pulling out examples from the profile to use as evidence in your paper. And not just saying, oh, okay, I think this, right? Or I believe this, right? You want to pull on specific examples, specific posts, specific images, things like that, to prove to us that that's the case. So for this paper, also, you really don't want to use first person, because the moment you say, I believe or I think, it becomes more biased. And your goal is to be an objective analyzer, or as objective as you can be. So you want to keep your your personal opinions out of this paper to the point that you're not talking about their agenda or what, how great they are, or how horrible they are, anything like that. So as it says there, you shouldn't be arguing about it, right? This shouldn't kind of divert into some argument about Britain leaving the European Union or something like that, because that has nothing to do with this paper. So that's something you want to make sure you stay focused on, analyzing the figure and the content they have. So so you're looking at the rhetorical effectiveness. So that means you're going to use the rhetorical appeals as your lens. So in a couple of days, you're going to be looking at the different rhetorical appeals: ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos, which are basically credibility, emotion, logic, and then timing or timeliness. So that's going to be the lens that you use to analyze the Facebook or Twitter profile you're looking at. So you need to make sure you're looking at each of those different rhetorical appeals. Now, these are the framework, right? But this is not, the goal isn't to just say, yes, they use this or they don't use this. You're ultimately saying, here's their purpose, and they use the rhetorical appeals to do this or not to do this. So now it's important too, if they are talking about, or if they don't use a rhetorical appeal, you need to talk about that. So if you notice there's a lot of logic and a lot of credibility on a profile, but there's not a lot of emotion to engage people, that's something to talk about. Why is that? And does that ultimately hurt the effectiveness of the profile or not? Or there's a whole lot of emotion, but there's no real logic, no evidence to back up the claims that the person is making on their Facebook page. So again, right, is that a problem? Probably, right? And, you want to be able to talk about that. So things you want to think about, there's a whole kind of list there, right? So you want to think about what is, who the audience is, what is the purpose of the account, what's the voice or the tone of the persona, like how are they presenting themselves, right? Because when we look at Facebook or Twitter, sure, or even Instagram, right? These are places where you can see into people's lives, but you're not really seeing everything about their life, right? You're seeing what they choose to have you see. So what is it that they are giving you access to, and why is that? So, in terms of the affordances and limitations of the social networking site, what that means, what you want to think about, right? What can you do and not do on Facebook or Twitter, right? If you look at a Facebook page, you can change the content, right? You can change the profile picture, you can change the cover photo, but you can't change where those things are laid out on the page, at least at the moment, right? Given Facebook and their propensity for changing things every couple of days, that might change, right? But right now, right, people have to work within those constraints, right? What Facebook allows you to do, how they share posts, that kind of stuff. And so you want to think about that in your analysis. So anything they share in terms of content, right, that is fair game. So anything they link to, so any image they share, any video they share of themselves, or any video they link to, or if they link to an article from the Wall Street Journal or Entertainment Weekly, right, you can talk about that. And for this paper, you don't have to cite it, just provide the context and say, oh, they link to, June 15th article from Entertainment Weekly about this, right? So provide some context there, because anytime they link to something, that's evident, that's some rhetorical work they're doing. So all that's fair game. One of the things you're not doing in this paper, though, is looking at what the average person has to say, right? So you're not going on, Kanye West's Twitter account and saying, oh, what is everybody saying back to Kanye, right? You're not engaging. I don't want you to bring in the viewpoint of kind of, the average person in Tempe or Topeka or Washington, D.C., who's maybe just commenting about something and didn't think, oh, suddenly their comment's going to end up in a paper at ASU. So you're focusing on the content posted by the account. Now, you want to focus on the main elements of their persona. So this is not just about describing the Facebook or the Twitter account, but, picking out examples and saying, here's the rhetorical work it's doing. As it says, you don't want to include any comments, right? This is only content posted by the account. One of the important things is you need to focus on specific examples. So you can't just say, oh, they use emotion, and then provide no example about how they use emotion. So you'll notice bolded right there, your analysis should be based solely on the content of the profile. You shouldn't have any need for an outside source in this paper. And if you do, you need to talk to me about it. You need to send me an email or set up a online conference to talk to me about it. Because if you don't, and I see you've incorporated an outside source into your paper, you're automatically going to be docked a lot of points, because that's not part of this assignment. So So if you don't get permission and you include an outside source, you will lose a lot of points along the way. So you can go, so on the Facebook or Twitter page, you can go back a year, basically, right? You can almost go back to, I'd say, like August 2015. So you've got a lot of time in terms of a window to look at the content. So the goals here, right? So as the sheet kind of talks about, you're showing me that you have an understanding and you're able to identify the different rhetorical appeals and how they operate. So, examples of ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos. You're able to express and communicate a knowledge of working features or key rhetorical features such as audience, situation, the use of appropriate argument strategies. So thinking about who they're talking to, what they're trying to accomplish, things like that. Practicing evaluating the validity of information used to support. So you're able to look at something and not just say, oh, I like this image on Bernie Sanders. That means it must be 100% true and great, right? So where's that information coming from? How credible does it seem to be? Things like that. And then show an awareness of how arguments are targeted towards specific audiences. So one of the things you need to identify early on as you're working on this paper is who is the target audience? Is it potential voters? Is it fans of action films? Is it some, an audience for a particular radio show or something like that, right? Because each of these audiences are different and they may overlap, right? But, when you're thinking about a particular audience, you're doing something and you're trying to speak to that audience. So the length and the format to this paper needs to be at least 1,250 words. And think about word count with each of the assignments. So word count is just the body of the paper. So just your actual analysis. So for this paper, you don't have a works cited page, but you'll have an MLA header, title, things like that. So all that stuff doesn't count for or against your word count. So the body of the paper has to be at least 1,250 words. The maximum is 1,750 words. Later on, when we get to the works cited page stuff and assignment 2 and 3, those won't count as part of your word count, either for or against you. So formatting, the paper needs to be in 12-point Times New Roman or calligraphy font, double spaced, 1-inch margins on all sides. It should have an MLA heading, which is your name, my name, the class, and the date. The 5th line should be a unique title, so not rhetorical analysis, but something a little bit more interesting. You need to have page numbers, which should be your last name and the page number in the header of every page on the right side. So we'll look at some basic MLA formatting stuff a little bit later in the unit, but you need to make sure that your paper is formatted correctly. And if you don't know how to do any of that stuff, there are tutorials out there. There are guidelines. You can always email me, or get in touch. So, but make sure it follows all MLA formatting guidelines. So, what I'm looking for in terms of grading this paper. So, do you analyze the argument on rhetorical lines? So, do you say, here's what they're trying to accomplish, and here's examples of how they use the rhetorical appeals to do that or not? Which means talking about each of the appeals. It's thoughtfully organized, so it makes sense how you organize the paper. There's an organizational guide that we'll talk about a little bit more later in the unit. But does it make sense about, do we follow you from point to point? How are your transitions? Do you have clear topic sentences? Does this kind of jump around all over the place like you just wrote it last night? Which is fine for a draft, but not for the final paper. So you remain objective throughout. So again, that you are able to provide evidence about how effective this is without saying, oh, I love this person or hate this person or anything like that. So, and that you use basic MLA format, as I was just talking about. So the breakdown here, you got the grading breakdown and the due dates and scheduled together. So, so for each paper, there's a topic paragraph that's due, and I will be looking over that, provide you some feedback to let you know that, yes, this topic works, you're on the right track, or you need to revise or think about this a little bit moving forward. So for this paper, it's 5% of your grade. And it's due by the end of the day on Tuesday, July 5th. So you basically got this week and the first weekend to think about your topic before you commit. And once you commit, you basically have to stick with it. You can't change your topic after that point in time because we're moving so quickly. So you need to, once you have a topic, you need to stick with it. But all topics do have to be approved. So you need to submit your topic paragraph. So your first draft is going to be due a few days later. So it's the first draft needs to be 1,000 words. So it should be a significant draft. It doesn't have to be the full draft of the paper yet. You'll have that following weekend, I think, to work on revising the paper before you turn in the full draft. If it is a full draft, that's great, but you don't have to be there yet. But there should be a good amount there. And that's going to be 10% of your grade. And that's going to be due at 10 a.m. on Friday, July 8th. So that's that first day that I was talking about in the welcome video, where your draft will be due at 10 a.m. and then you'll have a peer review activity to complete with a group. You'll be reviewing a couple of other people's papers, and then the peer review activity needs to be completed by the end of that day. So those content peer reviews are due 11:59 p.m. on Friday, July 8th. So then you have the weekend to work on your paper. The following Monday, July 11th, is slotted as a revision day and optional conference day. So it's basically time to work on your paper, and your only assignment for that day will be kind of post what progress you've made on revising your paper. And I will be available. I'll probably have a spreadsheet set up when we get a little bit closer. If you want to set up a time to conference with me about your draft before your revised draft is due, and ask any questions, get my feedback, anything like that. So that'll be Monday, July 11th. Then your full revised draft. So that next draft needs to be a full 1,250 words. That's going to be due at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, July 12th. And then we'll have an editing proofreading peer review activity that'll be due by the end of the day on July 12th, 11:59 p.m. And you're going to be using track changes and the comments features in Microsoft Word. So that's one of the main reasons you need to have Microsoft Word for this class. So make sure you get it before that point in time if you don't have it already. And then you'll get another round of feedback, and hopefully that will be the point where you're polishing up the paper and everything before it's due. So the final draft of your rhetorical analysis is going to be due Wednesday, July 13th at 11:59 p.m. So if you choose to do the Writing Center extra credit, that's the last day to send me the proof. And then you'll notice just right there, it's that last deadline's optional, and that's only if you're doing the extra credit. But that is, you need to email me the reflection by the end of the day on Thursday, July 14th at 11:59 p.m. So on that last page, you'll notice this is a list of some suggested Facebook and Twitter pages, so that people have done and kind of are good for the assignment. But you do not, as I said, have to stick to this list at all. If there's somebody else you think you'd like to do for this paper, that's fine. And I always just suggest letting me know beforehand, just kind of sending me an email and say, hey, does this work? But there are a few things that do have to be a few things that you kind of have to check off the list before you can work on somebody's particular profile page. So you'll notice right there, it's got to be the profile of a public figure. So this has to be somebody who is out there, whether they're a celebrity, an artist, a politician, right? Somebody who's already who has a public page and is clearly reaching out to a large audience. So this cannot be your best friend, your grandma, yourself, anything like that. This guy down the street, things like that. So it also needs to be the official page for them. So now some pages, right? If you look at President Obama's Facebook page, I believe it's run by his campaign, right? So it's not always him officially posting, which is fine, right? It's his official online presence, right? And a lot of times you have that little blue check mark to let you know that this is a verified account. But you need to make sure it's the official page, because there are fan pages out there. There are kind of fake pages. There are Facebook automatically generates some pages, things like that. So you need to make sure it's actually officially their Twitter account. It's their official presence out there on Twitter or on Facebook. The third thing, and this is because people have kind of come up on this in the past, is you need to make sure there's enough content from August 2015 until now for you to actually talk about in your paper. The example I'll use is a couple of years ago, somebody wanted to do Will Smith, and they started out their paper, and they didn't really look at this. And then as they started writing their draft, there were, I think, 3 posts in the past 10 months or something like that. And so that's really just not enough to write a paper on. So make sure there's enough content there. So as it says there, I'll be looking over topics. You can always email me with questions, post questions in the discussion board, things like that. So, you'll have this sheet too as well to refer back to and everything like that. But please, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, good luck picking a topic and moving forward.